If you look up high here, right below the initials, there's a mortise right up there. Okay? Originally, this tie beam right here was at that elevation. Does that make sense? So that piece was originally 3 feet higher or 4 feet higher. But with the invention of the hay track, which is that metal bit that runs down the middle of the ridge, with the invention and the implementation of that hay track and the technology that went with it, the crane that would move hay through the barn, they had to drop this down. So in this area where they dropped it down, it wasn't too bad. They were able to reuse a tenon, an existing tenon, and then they added what we call a free tenon on this end over here, basically a tenon that's just notched into the bottom of the timber, or excuse me, notched through the timber and connects the old work, the original post with the original but now shorter tie beam. This process took place throughout this entire structure, but it took place in place because if they did it when they had taken it down or when they were building it, they wouldn't have to use that free tenon. They would have been able to just build it intact. There's further evidence of them moving everything down throughout the barn, and we can look at that if you like. This is so at some point this barn stopped here, and there was originally a post that came from here to the floor, just like that wall. Well, they wanted to move the tie beam down, so they had to stretch the posts with this little nail-on arrangement. They had to stretch the post down and tie everything together. They also had to, I don't know which side you can see best, or if you can, they also had to create a slot in the post from the top of the post down to the bottom of the tie beam to allow it to be moved down. And that is not something that you would do if you were going to do it on the sawhorses or as you were building. That's a sign that it was done in place. And it wasn't easy. Somebody knew what they were doing. There's a couple things that indicate that this barn was actually a collection of barns, probably 3 barns, or it could have been, it's possible it was 2 barns and a builder connecting the 2 of them. I can't really tell. But it's not the same carpenter that built this barn, that built that barn, that built that barn. Not the same builder. The 1840 section of this collection of barns, from this post south, is an 1840 threshing barn in White Oak, and from this point north we have the connector, which I don't know if this connector was built by which carpenter this connector was built by, but it was part of the assembly process. The connector shows some skill, it shows some inclination to use leaning posts as this other barn does, so there's some sense that it may have been somehow they were related. This bent in this connector between the threshing barn and the hay barn was built, purpose-built to be low enough to let the hay track travel over it. So this one was built accordingly. Does that mean that this was, I don't know what it means. I just know that it was purpose-built with the tie low enough so it wouldn't have to, it never did get modified the way the rest of the barn was. When one of the subtleties of this building and why it was challenged the way it is because of the hay track amendment that somebody had done, don't know when, but it was done in place. And the evidence of that is this long slot mortise here, so where originally the tie beam, the longitudinal piece that connects post to post, would have been all the way at the top of the slot, but to do this without taking the barn apart, they cut a slot from there all the way down to here and just drop the tie beam down and made connections that hold everything together. Again, this is a relatively successful version of the hay track conversion. Many of them have failed because they chose a different path. These guys knew they needed to have those pieces in place, and they just dropped them down. It's not a bad thing. Again, the evidence that this building was collected here and then modified in place is just overwhelming when you look at those kind of things, because that would have been done if they were moving it here or they were building it. They would have picked it up, they would have set the pieces down on the ground, done the work on saw horses, and then put it together in the right place so that it wouldn't be a trench, it would just be another mortise right here.